couldn't escape now if I wanted to. They've trapped me here.
Who have?
Mean, despicable, underhanded lot.
Pull to open.
Pull to open!
Yes, and what do you do?
All right, I suppose you want to see my pass. Yes, well, I haven't got one. And I'm not going to tell you my name either.
You're mystery man with the police box.
Well, don't just stand there arguing with me, man. Get on with it.
Here come the drums!
So here it comes, the sound of drums. Here come the drums, here come the drums.
Hello and welcome to Pull to Open, an ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who, all of it, the entire television run of the program, old and new in random order. I'm Pete Paschal.
I'm Chris Taylor, and we're just a couple of guys who like to make the sound of drums at the beginning of every podcast. I think there, Pete, you were on a triple beat. I was on a quadruple beat. We're going to have to figure out what the Doctor Who theme does and which one we're doing. But
I think I regressed.
I
regressed a bit.
We're remixing it. We're remixing, man. This is great. It's fantastic.
We started doing the 1, 2, 3, 4 after a bit, and surprise reader, we've been away for a while, and I kind of forgot how we did the intro. I think
it's been a while. We'll get to the reasons why later. But Pete, where has our randomizer been taking us?
Our randomizer, when last we activated it, the last few times we activated it anyway, we were previously 3 episodes ago at the Mark of the Rani, which was a Colin Baker episode from his first season, featuring the Rani, Master, and tree mines or something.
Tree
mines feature prominently in that one. Very memorable. 2 episodes ago, it was one of our Viscount bangers. I think maybe our first official Viscount banger. That's our highest rating.
Yes.
In the Pull to Open universe is a Viscount banger, and it was the regeneration episode Logopolis, Tom Baker's last. Huge, big winner there. And then we zapped back to the Pertwee era for what might be the ultimate archetypical Doctor Who story of the classic series, the Carnival of Monsters.
Yeah.
So, and then that has brought us to yet another Pertwee episode. The randomizer, last we activated it, has landed us at Season 7, Serial 1, Spearhead From Space, the first Jon Pertwee episode.
That's right. The first color episode, the first episode with 2 hearts, like so many firsts that we've got to get to. And it's kind of an appropriate thing. Maybe the randomizer knew we were going to take a long break. We did not. Again, we'll get to the reason why. But it's a nice one to sort of pick up with, if you're going to pick up with anywhere. It's our second Auton episode, because we did Terror of the Autons first. And that seems a very timey-wimey randomizer way to be doing these things. It's just I've got my hair cut for the occasion, like Pertwee, is shorter hair in this famously, and a lot of interesting reasons why the randomizer brought us here. But first,
it's also our second post-regeneration episode after the Power of the Daleks. So it'll be interesting to compare them, because this is back-to-back in a sense.
Right. And Randomizer really loves regenerations, and it's going to burn through them, both the post and the pre-regeneration stories.
Right?
We'll
see.
Yeah, we've not got that many left. But anyway, first,
we'll get there.
We'll get there. We're first going to do a section that we're calling, what are we calling it, Pete?
It's now the Pull to Open feedback loop.
Nice name.
Until someone suggests a better one. But
I love
we're going to go over what's going on in the Pull to Open universe. So, as everyone knows, podcasts love reviews. We thrive on reviews. People who leave reviews are our favorite Pull to Open fans, especially those who live. Those who live are awesome. But those who leave reviews at the Apple Podcasts app, which is one of the only places I think you could leave reviews, but they definitely help with visibility of the show. And we've had a few lately. So, as we like to do, we like to read them out on air. And I'm going to read you 2 of our latest. So one is from someone named Krusty Frank 27, and it's Krusty with a K. And it's very brief. The headline is Fantastic Podcast. Wonderful deep dive on Doctor Who. And that's it. That's
Fabulous.
The review. And that's all
Short
you
and sweet.
need to do, folks. If you leave a review, you don't even have to go this long. If you just want to leave a rating and an emoji, that's perfectly acceptable. Whatever the minimum character count is on Apple, I'm sure it's pretty small. Go ahead and leave it. But that's all you really need to do. It's great. Thank you, Krusty Frank 27. Really appreciate you taking the time.
But also, if you're not much time at all, but if you are one of our more ambitious listeners, and we do like our listeners who are both alive and ambitious, you could leave a review like the one we're about to read from Sleeping Dalek, which first of all, great name.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of menacing 2-word Doctor Who story there. Sleeping
Dalek. Better than
Love
a Krusty Dalek.
Or Krusty Dalek 27. Anyway, what does Sleeping Dalek have to say?
Well, the headline is The Best Podcast This Side of the Universe. Woo, good title.
Yeah.
And it reads, this might be the best Doctor Who podcast I have ever heard.
Ever.
Deep discussions on theme. Check. Relevant conversations on episode concepts. Check. Hosts chemistry. Check. Critical opinions. Check. Theorizing while acknowledging canon inconsistencies. Check. All caps here. Staying on topic. Check. In fact, I don't know if that one's, we really deserve that one.
Let's go right off topic right here just to prove him wrong. But no, continue.
Fact accuracy. Check. Comfortable length. Check. Opposed opinions to me with understandable arguments. Check. Low instances of negativity towards certain eras of the show. Check. It's ticking all my boxes.
Wow. Thank you, Sleeping Dalek.
Yeah.
I like that Sleeping Dalek had all those boxes.
I know.
And we checked them all. And it's
roughly 10, I believe.
Yeah. And who doesn't make a list of 10 boxes
right?
to check when choosing a Doctor Who podcast?
That's probably more than when choosing a mate, honestly.
Yeah, really. And they're also comfortable length might be one of the check boxes. Hey! However, we are glad that we are a comfortable length for you, Sleeping Dalek. We do endeavor to make you comfortable.
Indeed. There are more reviews, guys, but in the interest of time and staying on topic and also just pacing them out a bit, we're going to save those for future broadcasts. So keep those reviews coming, and we'd be happy to read them out in the show. Thank you very much, Krusty Frank 27 and Sleepy Dalek.
Yes. You will still get a prize. If we mentioned before, if you're one of the first 50 people to leave a review, you get a prize. More on that next time. But in the rest of the feedback loop, we've got new technology to talk about. Newfangled video technology. Yeah,
so if you haven't listened in a while, you can listen more often on YouTube. That I was going somewhere there. I don't know. No, we're on YouTube. We've been on YouTube for a while, but the new technology there is we have a new URL, relatively new. It's youtube.com/pull-to-open. And true to our word, we have been uploading old episodes of the show since YouTube being, well, at least consistently uploaded on YouTube is relatively new. And now a good chunk of season 2, we're not quite at most. I think we're almost halfway through season 2 being uploaded. But some of our older episodes where we talk about Dark Water, Death in Heaven, Sleep No More, a couple of great Capaldis, Pyramids of Mars, a big favorite of a lot of people, as well as one of our, I think it was our first Pertwee venture that way back in the day, Inferno. Our podcast on Inferno is up there now. So you can check all that stuff out. More of the old episodes are coming every Wednesday. And we also have all of our plot summaries, the little segment we like to call TLDW, or Too Long Didn't Watch, Too Long Doctor Who. Those are all up there, the ones that we've done. And we might be cutting new TLDWs of ones we didn't cut videos of because it took us a while after we started TLDW to actually start doing the video clips of it. Yeah. And so there's a few of those that we haven't done. I don't want to overpromise, but some of those are now being done, and we actually have the very first TLDW.
What?
Pyramids of Mars was our very first time we did TLDW, and it now exists in video form on YouTube and on TikTok. So enjoy that, guys.
Wow, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that with my eyes.
It was painful for me because I did the first TLDW, and there's a moment, you'll see it when you watch it, where I completely go off the rails. So we learned a lot since then, guys. So as I hope you will find later, but
It's still a very suspenseful segment. But anyway,
Indeed.
speaking of social, and speaking of things that you see with your eyes, like YouTube, we've got Spotify video podcasts happening. You're not just pulling to open your ears, you're pulling to open your eyes all over the place, and you're pulling to open them and pulling and marking to like them on TikTok. That was a bit of a tortured connection, but how's TikTok doing, Pete?
TikTok's doing great. We're at about 7,500 followers, and we love each and every one of you. We haven't been super active there lately because of the hiatus, and we've been focusing a lot on getting our YouTube catalog up to speed. But we're going to start getting back to it, guys. You're going to start seeing more and more of the videos. We love you guys on TikTok. We know a big chunk of the listenership found us there. We're never gonna give you up, TikTok,
or let you down.
And we even have a TikTok comment of, I guess, the month now, rather than the week. So this is on one of our videos about Planet of Fire, which, wow, that was a while back.
That was our very first random episode.
Yeah, so it was one of the things that we basically, it was a recut video based on the old commentary, because Planet of Fire was one of the very first ones we did in this new era. And we did a new video on it, and it was this video about the TARDIS components being a plot device in the Davison era. So they would constantly pull things out and exchange them with the Master and screw up the Doctor's TARDIS and the Master's TARDIS with things like the temporal limiter and the quantum accelerator and whatever else.
They would immobilize the TARDIS. Imagine that.
All the time. All the time. And I remember I actually complained about it. Like, this is kind of a plot device crutch, and you could just easily disable the TARDIS by pulling one thing out of it. And I think the criticism's valid, but that said, I always have someone on TikTok to ground me, because a person with the handle Mythical Memes,
great handle, said,
I would highly suggest that no one pulls any circuitry out of a plane, let alone a time machine. And I'm like,
yep.
Yeah, I think you've got a point there. The issues with TARDISes being immobilized, I think that might actually be of a certain grade of realism, given how delicate and what sort of energies and technology you would need to do such a thing. So I'll give you that to you, Mythical Memes.
As someone who's spent a lot of time on planes recently, I can absolutely concur that pulling circuitry out of your craft is a really bad idea. I saw a lot of drunk people. Nobody went as far as to pull circuitry out of the plane. So, yeah, don't do it. Don't do it when you're standing inside of a plane. Don't do it when you're standing inside of a TARDIS. In fact, in general, just don't. If you see a console, don't let your first thought be, I'm going to rip some goddamn circuit boards out of this thing. Just don't do it.
The only time it's acceptable is if you're Bruce Willis in Die Hard 3 and you desperately need to turn your car around to start shooting at the guy who's chasing you, and you don't want the anti-lock brakes to work. Then you can pull out all the circuits from underneath the car console. But other than that, don't touch anything.
Always that one exception that proves the rule. But yes, we also have an honorable mention TikTok comment for August, I believe.
Yeah, and this one is just a little self-serving, and honestly, it's how I'm sneaking in a third review. So Will_Harper101 has a very brief comment. It says, "This podcast is underrated as hell. These guys are so interesting with their Who discussions." Yes, thank you, Will Harper.
Underrated as hell. If you're looking for 3 words to throw into your review of Pull to Open, they'd be pretty good ones. Underrated as hell.
Just when I'm cutting the sizzle reel for the podcast, I'm going to put those as the reviews that rush into the foreground or whatever as you cut between scenes, which would just be you and I in front of microphones. But anyway,
I mean, I'll have one quibble with the statement, which is that I don't think that hell has been underrated in the history of humanity. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was underrated in Doctor Who until the Satan Pit, but. I think hell is kind of overrated, but we are underrated as hell. I love the idea of people just sort of swarming to your review engines and filling them up with underrated as hell, underrated. Every single one of you say that, and then we become overrated as hell. You tip the balance at some point. Yeah, nice problem to have.
I'll take that one.
So yes,
Good
so
stuff.
as I
I'm going to
say,
count that as a review. Will Harper, if you want that to count as a review,
Yeah.
feel free to go to the Apple Podcast Store and leave exactly that same comment. We'd really appreciate it. But,
copy and paste,
we
my friend.
still
Copy and
appreciate
paste.
it. Exactly. In this case, it's completely okay.
Yeah.
Less
So-
okay when you're copying entire plots from your previous work, Terrence Dix. Anyway, no, I shouldn't bug Terrence Dix. It's actually still kind of okay if you do that.
Yeah.
Okay. There's lots of other business we could talk about. There are things that are going on in the Doctor Who universe.
I would actually like to hear that before I say what's been going on with me. I'd love to. As I mentioned, I've been on planes for a while. I've not been paying attention to Doctor Who news for about the last month or so. So, Pete, seems to have been a lot of interesting things going on.
I'll rapid fire these a little bit because they've, there's other Doctor Who podcasts that are a little more up to speed on the news. They go more deeper into it. But here's the main beats as I have heard in the last few weeks. So the home of Doctor Who on streaming has been two places, obviously BritBox for the classic series, but HBO Max has been the home thus far for New Who, and HBO Max is not long for this world. I don't know if you've heard. They're actually since Discovery, and there's basically in the world of corporate acquisitions and entertainment, HBO Max is going to get sunset at some point, and some new service or set of services will replace. That's probably at least a year away, but it's whether it's brought on by that or not. There's been a lot of chatter about Doctor Who moving to Disney Plus as its new home, which, again, everyone has opinions on this. I just want it somewhere.
Yeah. Disney Plus would be great.
Well, and in the interest of saving money, like I'm already subscribed to Disney Plus. It's relatively affordable as the services go. HBO Max, as most people know, is about, double the cost of Disney Plus, and I would not mind what that would mean for my streaming expenses month to month.
Having old and new in one place would be fantastic.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And yet, particularly the classic Who, it's again not been a great time for my BritBox experience. I don't know about you, Pete, but the way that it makes you bounce around between episodes, like if you want to go to episode 2 of Spearhead from Space from episode 1, as I did, you kind of have to, if you're not going all the way to the end where they automatically link the episodes for you, like say you're clicking ahead at the end of the episode, you had to, as I had to, go all the way out, all the way back in again, and it just it's one of those having to do a security line at an airport to reach for a metaphor that may or may not have happened to me in the last couple of days, when you could just do a connecting flight. So
I could complain about BritBox. It's gotten better. I mean, I could nitpick a bit that I don't think it's really the app on the phone is cast compatible anymore, but they do AirPlay, and for strange reasons, the frame rate is off. But generally, I think it's improved a bit since we first started doing this podcast. I do have one complaint that I'm actually going to stay for the main pod.
Okay.
Because it actually directly relates to Spearhead from Space.
Yeah, I think I know what that is. But also they've had the temerity to raise their prices by $1. So they were cheaper than Disney Plus. They're now the same price as Disney Plus. So not great BritBox at this time of inflation to and people's salaries effectively lowering to raise the price list. But anyway, I would like Disney Plus to host Doctor Who. It seems like a natural fit.
Yeah. Get a lot of genres in one place there.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on. There is a rumor now that in the new season, which is probably almost 2 years away at this point, when Ncuti Gatwa takes over as the Doctor, that Stephen Moffat will write some episodes.
So good.
Which would be, I honestly, this is the most predictable rumor. I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but it is duh. It's kind of what he and Davies are obviously famously good friends, and they're both similar Doctor Who nerds, and Moffat was the star writer of RTD's original era. So, of course, he's going to be writing some more Doctor Who.
But I think I'm sort of excited to hear this because I was thinking once again recently of something we talked about in the past, this notion that RTD and Moffat are the Beatles of Doctor Who. They are John and Paul in that they need each other to sort of rein in each other's kind of worst excesses, right? They balance out nicely when they're working together. You get, Girl in the Fireplace, you get Silence in the Library, you get the really good, solid, classic, stone cold classics of the modern era.
No pressure, guys.
Yeah. But if you do work together, that's sort of the level of that we're going to be expecting new Beatles music, basically.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I want another Abbey Road. So that was sort of almost a given. I just wanted to go over it. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the Centenary special, and I don't know if I pronounced that right. Centenary?
Centenary would be the British way, but I don't know if it's the same over here.
I don't know. The 100 years, but why don't they just say that? Who even knows what a centenary is anyway? The
BBC.
The BBC, apparently. So it's happening in October. No, wait. We don't know that. That's the rumor. I forgot. This is the rumor. So we don't know when it is yet. There's still been no date announced, but they're saying October. And the precise rumor, again, just rumor, is October 16th. So honestly, by the time you hear this podcast, it may be confirmed. I doubt it, because they usually announce these things in September. They usually wait till like the last possible minute to sort of begin their actual marketing campaign. I know Doctor Who fans have been complaining there hasn't been a lot of marketing. And I think there's a lot of validity to those comments generally. But I do think what's probably happened here is, as much as Doctor Who itself might want to promote its coming stuff, it's getting pulled into the centenary like general marketing, like whenever that begins. I suspect whenever because there's a lot of other stuff besides Doctor Who. So I wouldn't read too much into there not being a ton of marketing yet. I think that's probably just all going to cop it at once.
Doctor Who has, I'll just speak extemporaneously about this, has had a historic connection with the New York Comic Con in October, which is this year, October the 6th to the 9th. I would definitely see it having a prominent presence there. That seems to be about the right time to launch a marketing campaign. Or capitalize on one. Definitely not in the middle of August, guys. Don't expect anything right now. The world is asleep. I wouldn't be surprised if you're listening to this on a beach somewhere. You don't launch marketing campaigns in August.
No,
even for awesome Doctor Who seasons or episodes.
Post Labor Day, watch for that sizzle reel that includes Doctor Who and probably a new trailer. But exactly when, who knows? Okay, but that all fits. So other stuff. There was an interview that Neil Patrick Harris gave about his role, and he was about a lot of things, but he mentioned his role in Doctor Who, which is coming up as part of the 60th anniversary special or specials. I don't know if that's clear yet on like what that will entail next year.
So much mystery.
So that's a whole nother thing we could get into, but in the interest of time, we won't get into that. But he did mention, when asked about Ncuti Gatwa, how excited he was that he would be not just the first Black Doctor, but the first gay Doctor, which got everyone's eyebrow to raise. And is he getting the Doctor confused with Ncuti Gatwa's character on Sex Education, or there's also the sort of I don't know if the actor has publicly discussed his sexuality. Is that what I'm not sure if that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. Or whether he's being outed by Neil Patrick Harris there.
Well, I don't want to get into that. I'm more interested if he is the gay character. Doctor. Because he wouldn't be though, right? Because in a sense, like Jodie Whittaker is already clearly interested in Yaz.
Yep.
So,
and come on, Captain Jack. The interest level in Captain Jack has been more than just friends, I think, in the past, shall we say. But that's a whole other topic.
Well, he did run from him to the end of time, so...
Yep, that's right.
There was that, too.
That's kind of telling.
It could be, actually, you could read it the other way, 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, that's an interesting little note there. We'll see how that goes. Still, excited for Ncuti Gatwa. His first season. There's a lot to happen between now and then. Obviously, David Tennant and Catherine Tate are back. Exactly how they're going to handle that and in what capacity, we don't know. Like I said, there's a lot we could go into there and be like pure speculation, alternate universe stuff. But I think at some point we've got to steer it back around, guys, and
we'll
bring it back to what we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
which is
Spearhead from
Spearhead from
Space.
Space.
But before we get into that, I do want to share a little personal information here because your fans of the podcast have been so great that I feel like you're kind of like in my close friend group, and I'd like to share with everyone. We've been unexpectedly off the air for a little while, and something has been going on for a while. That is that my dad, the man who introduced me to Doctor Who, was very, very unexpectedly sick very quickly. That was the reason that I was in the UK for our Mark of the Rani episode, which you may remember. I was in a 14th century castle at that point. I was visiting my dad at that point. And I have to share that, unfortunately, just before we were due to record this originally, about 3 weeks ago, he passed away very quickly, unexpectedly, kind of a blessing in a way that it wasn't dragged out and he wasn't in a lot of pain. So I went over there. We had his funeral last week. I actually mentioned Doctor Who during the funeral. It was weird, sort of interesting the ways that it cropped up during this sort of, as anyone who's lost a parent knows, or, family member, there's a lot to take care of, right? And, especially if they haven't specified any sort of burial details. So I found myself looking through catalogues of coffins, one of which I sent to you, Pete, is a picture of a TARDIS coffin.
Right.
That is, my dad was not that level of Doctor Who fan. He's the guy who got me into it. His doctors were Troughton and Pertwee. He was watching from the start. He remembers An Unearthly Child. From his childhood. And, that was 1963. He was in Liverpool. He was a contemporary of the Beatles. So he saw that. Always said that it was odd that he associated with his childhood, given that he was kind of, I think, 17 at the time in 1963. But it kind of took him back to his childhood, right? But he didn't really get into it until Troughton was the Doctor. He liked Pertwee. He sort of kind of handed over the family interest in Doctor Who to me at some point during Tom Baker. But still, he's the guy who introduced me to Doctor Who. And for that reason, I actually, we did a little graveside eulogy when we buried him in a lovely woodland cemetery, which made me think of a lot of Whovian settings like Forest of the Night. Like it gave it gave us that sense. And I actually mentioned that fantastic Moffat quote from the Matt Smith era, from the end of the first Matt Smith season. We're all stories in the end. Just make it a good one, eh? And I quoted
Nice.
that. That was right at the end of my eulogy. And I said, "Bloody hell, Dad, did you make it a good one?" So. That was that, yeah. And I've mentioned it before. I'll probably mention it again. But it was quite nice to come back. I am now back in the US this week, and to have this sort of easing back in, specifically with Spearhead from Space, because this is right in the middle of his two favorite Doctors, and it's definitely an episode that he would have watched, and probably. I sort of imagine frowned to himself a little bit, like, okay, what are they doing with this thing? They sort of copying Quatermass, what's going on here? But we'll get to that. We'll get to the discussion. Yeah. But I'd like to thank all of you for giving me the chance to talk about this. It is helpful to talk about. It's helpful to recognize, I think, that fandom does sustain us in these difficult times in life. It's not just it's not just a frivolous thing. It unites generations. It reminds us, and Doctor Who especially, as a show that helps kids think about death, prepare for these kinds of eventualities. It does walk up to a lot of interesting lines sometimes. And I'm definitely glad that we buried rather than cremated my dad, for example, because of the 3-word foundation, if you all remember that from Dark Water Death in Heaven. The screaming, "Don't cremate me, don't cremate me." That was later revealed to be a missy plot, but it's still like those words have reoccurred in my head. So it was a lovely thing that we did for him, and I'm glad that we did for that reason. So it's fandom sustains us. It can sustain you as well. We're all connected in a way that you may not normally associate with entertainment, but it is ultimately great examples of stories that connect us.
Well, Chris, I want to say thanks for sharing all that. I really loved hearing about the eulogy you gave. I think it just set the perfect tone. I think I speak for everyone listening. We're so sorry for your loss. We're
you.
super glad to have you back.
Thank you.
And what you said about him being responsible for your fandom very directly, I think that's going to resonate with a lot of fans, because I think a lot of longtime fans probably encountered the show when they were fairly young. And I think just inherently your parents play a role in that one way or the
They do.
other, whether they directly get you into the show or they tacitly approve and probably watch it with you.
Yeah.
And so I think Doctor Who, for Doctor Who fans in particular, there's sort of a natural family and parental connection that doesn't exist with all genres. So
That is true.
you know,
Doctor
it's a
Who,
yeah.
you're hiding behind the sofa, and usually your parents the ones sitting on the sofa, right? Going, why are you hiding behind that sofa? And I mean, it is one of the most wonderful things I always look forward to when we record this podcast, Pete, is hearing about you watching it with your kids and hearing what their reaction is, and just having that sense that we are continuing to pass it on to the next generation, and that this is the kind of show that you can hand down from generation to generation. And but yeah, you know, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your stories of connecting through generations via the show that has been going on, you know, longer than many lives. Right at this stage, we'll soon be at the 60th anniversary. It's extraordinary to think about it extending that far into the past. But yes,
just keeps regenerating.
It does, and it's so again yet another reason why it's so perfect that we're talking about Spearhead from Space. So
well we should start talking about Spearhead from Space.
Indeed, without further ado.
We have to transition at some point. And guys, this is it. This is where we go to our regular segment that we talked about earlier, TLDW, Too Long Didn't Watch, Too Long Doctor Who. And this is a classic series episode, and we allot 30 seconds for every classic series episode, which gives one of us a full 2 minutes to summarize the story of Spearhead from Space. And as luck would have it, Chris, I had to look this up because it was been so long since we've done it, but it's your turn.
I welcome the challenge. I really do. It's this is sort of signifies a return to ordinary life for me, and it's a bit of a challenge. But again, you know, we talked about this story, Spearhead from Space. Very nice, easy one to ease us back in to the flow of things. So I'm kind of, you know, watch me screw it up now. But I'm feeling pretty confident that we can summarize the story pretty quickly, and also that the summary is not really the point. But anyway, we'll get to that. And now I know
you've got this. I know you've got this.
Now I am spinning my wheels.
Okay. Are you ready, sir?
I am closing all of my tabs. Yes, because that's how we do this. We fly blind on TLDW. I can't even remember how it opens. Okay.
All right.
All right, I'm ready.
So we are going to start the official pull to open summary of Spearhead from Space in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so there's a bunch of meteorites that come to the Earth and they land there, and the Doctor also lands there in his new incarnation, falls out of the TARDIS, ends up in a county hospital. The Brigadier from UNIT is interviewing Miss Liz Shaw and introducing her to UNIT, and then he hears that there's this dude in the county hospital. Turns out it is the Doctor, even though he doesn't look like him. And the Doctor gets kidnapped by a bunch of weird people who seem to be hanging around the hospital.
30 seconds.
And he gets shot by the Brigadier's soldiers, but the Brigadier's basically brings him back to the hospital as he was escaping towards the TARDIS. He agrees to help the Brigadier investigate these sort of mysterious happenings that is going on with these meteorites, because it seems that some of them landed already and taken over this plastics factory. And guess what? It's the Autons. It's the nesting consciousness. They have taken over the plastic factory. They're taking over all of the plastics, plastic models in Britain, including shop window dummies and models of this particular Major General, who's basically the Brigadier's opposite number in the British Army, who has to interface with a lot. And they take him over, and this part of their world plan is they're just going to, swap bodies with a bunch of people. They already seem to have done at the plastic factory, and take over the world that way. And it's kind of getting serious. towards the end of it, and the Doctor has to try and sneak into his TARDIS to help build a lab thing. Basically, what he and Liz Shaw do is they build a machine that will destroy the Major General, whose body was taken over by the Nestine consciousness. They sort of get away with it rather quickly, rather easily, but the Doctor says that the Nestines probably will have heard about that, and this isn't the end, and he's basically with UNIT because he can't go anywhere in the TARDIS because it's been immobilized by the Time Lords.
You got a few more seconds.
And he's pissed off about it.
And time. All right. Good stuff. You did it. You completely nailed that one. You aced it.
Well, I'd like to thank Robert Holmes for not really making a difficult story here.
Yeah. It's pretty straightforward alien invasion stuff.
Yeah, very, very
60s.
basic. I think that's sort of the first thing that we should mention is this is sort of like bog standard. Alien invasion is like so much like everything in the 50s and 60s. There had to be sort of body swapping, right? Mind control. It's got all that. I didn't really mention that the Nestine or the swarm leader, that channel's name.
And the octopus, I don't think you mentioned.
Oh yeah, there's a thing. There's a rather weird looking thing in a box that is the Nestine consciousness, or somehow connected to it, or it just is animating all of the.
Yeah, we can get to that, but I think the whole idea, like obviously the story itself is kind of like the actual plot does a little bit immaterial here. Like the whole idea here is this is a reboot, this is a new era, this is a lot like we mentioned at the intro. There's a lot of firsts in Spearhead from Space, and that is the goal of it. It's basically to give the viewer a new feeling and let them know here's what Doctor Who is going to be for the next for the foreseeable future, mostly because of budget.
Yep. So we're going to double up on actors. We're going to have a lot of reaction shots to things happening rather than things happening themselves. And also, I think we should mention right up front, this is one of the first, if not the only, Doctor Who to be recorded entirely on film.
Right, which I kind of I want to get into that in a lot of ways, and I might as well do it now. I mean, the background of it is that there was a strike at the BBC, and so they couldn't film in the studio, and rather than having them not film, in other words, like delay the season or cut it short, they said, no, let's do the first story in film and we just won't go in studio. And they thought it would be too expensive. It turned out it wasn't, and they were able to do it. And the thing is, I mean, this inadvertently, I think, it's serendipity. This actually looks like one of the least cheap episodes of Doctor Who because it's basically all location, even though there's interiors and stuff. There's no studio stuff. So like the factory they go to is an actual factory,
right?
The hospital. I mean, it wasn't. I forget exactly what it was, but it was. Oh, I think it's funny. There's a key thing that I just found out today on why the randomizer brought us here. But regardless, the locations are authentic, and it just looks great. Not only that, because it's film, and I'm sorry to get to the technical phrase of this right away.
This is great stuff.
They actually were able to do a better remaster of Spearhead from Space than virtually any other classic episode. And I'm going to give huge points to the Blu-ray, which I watched. Like, if you compare it to what you would get on BritBox, it's kind of night and day in terms of the video quality.
It's fascinating to hear you say that because I watched it on BritBox. You watched it both ways, or I guess you just
I watched it initially on BritBox with my kids, and then I watched parts of it on the Blu-ray to note the difference, and I kind of wanted to restart again just to watch it all the quality. And then if you believe it or not, I actually also watched the DVD because it has the commentary, so I've seen all three, and the Blu-ray is by far the best in terms of video quality. But it got in my head, like, I wish there was an alternate universe where Doctor Who from Spearhead from Space forward was just shot entirely on film so that we could remaster most of the classic series at sort of a better level. I mean, obviously that didn't happen, but
It's interesting you say this particularly because I watched it on BritBox. I actually really liked that version, so I cannot imagine how good the Blu-ray must be. It really just popped for me, even on streaming, like old film does, like classic film does. It has that classic film feel.
Yeah,
it does feel like something from the 70s.
It's definitely a level up. I would say the
Yeah.
BritBox is kind of like seeing a movie where you still have the grain, sort of the film grain, and you love it, and it's obviously well made because it's a well crafted film, and they made the colors pop, and they did a lot of stuff that was cinematic. But to sort of see that remaster, to see that same experience without the grain and with it sort of cleaned up and a little bit of sharpening in some key places, you're just like, oh wow, this is arguably like the most cinematic Doctor Who has been in the classic series, from start to finish anyway.
Question for you: how was the audio on the Blu-ray? Because the audio on BritBox, I sort of think of this as just a legacy of the original, right? That they just had bad audio recording equipment. It's pretty terrible most of the time. Like I don't know if they were holding the boom mics too far away. A lot of episode 4 is almost unlistenable.
I should watch more of it again to get that sense, because I did feel like, particularly when you hear Pertwee speak, there's a bit of echoiness. I think in a lot of those unit scenes, because a lot of the rooms they shot in were so big, and I think the audio suffers throughout for that reason. I don't know if they could do much with that, but I didn't really notice much difference.
Well, so there is another, before we leave the filming, by the way, first of all, I'll just mention I got like serious George Lucas THX 1138 vibes from this, which is, if you've never seen it, it's his first student movie, and then he sort of turned it into his first his first film, hoping it would be a blockbuster. It's kind of a bummer, weird, dystopian, like a lot of weird angles on things and stuff like that. Definitely got that kind of vibe from this, which actually precedes at least the budget version, the big budget version of THX 1138. It's definitely in that milieu. Like I could see George Lucas, like if he'd ever done an episode of Doctor Who, I could see this being it. There are a lot of kind of great close-ups of I guess Channing and his henchmen, where they've almost distorted the lens, right? It's super sort of alienating and discombobulating.
The makeup was great too.
The makeup is
everyone
fantastic.
Look super plasticky who's an Auton.
Yes.
And because they have to emphasize that, there are good close-ups on a lot of the actors to just show the contrast.
Yeah.
So you have these nice, like really the classic textbook shots of the Brigadier on the phone, and it's either sort of chest up or waist up, and you could kind of see like this is the Brigadier as he was kind of always imagined to be. This is peak Brigadier.
Totally.
I mean,
he walks in like he owns the place. It's funny that we should come to this after our Brigadier encounters have sort of been in weird random order, especially like we first encountered him in Dark Water, I believe, as cyber dead cyber Brigadier, which is fantastic. And then we encountered him, I think, in Inferno as like evil Brigadier, and then Mordred Undead. Like
Mordred Undead. Well, good memory.
Yeah,
it's funny you're going over this. I'm recutting these right now, or have been in the last few weeks, and that's exactly right. Yeah.
So it's sort of the randomizer likes to mess around with the Brigadier, and here we see the Brigadier sort of. It's his first time. Well, obviously, it's not first time in the show because there've been two Nicholas Courtney episodes, stories prior to this. But it is. I mean, he looks like he owns the place, right? He's so in command of his character already, whereas Pertwee is obviously all over the place in terms of trying to figure out who his doctor is. He's trying to do this Troughton impression, but the Brig just really lights up the screen in these. But I was
totally. How did you like his uniform? This is the original, I guess, of this era uniform where he has this sort of beige colored. It's very distinctive. All the
beige
guys
jumpsuit.
have the beige jumpsuit, exactly.
It's very 70s, isn't it? It's very, you could only get away with it. Like, talk about the unit dating controversy, which we really shouldn't. This is so the 1970s. What's more 1970s than a beige jumpsuit? Come on, people. Case closed. Units in the 1970s,
Yeah.
Sarah Jane Smith was on crack in the Pyramids of Mars, where she said it was from 1980. Like, that's
Well, I gotta
the
say,
only...
like, I like the uniforms, and I probably prefer them to the things he wore later, apart from maybe his sort of action tunic.
Yeah,
But when he gets more standard green, I
yeah,
just feel like they lose. I like that this is a distinctive look for Unit.
it is.
And I also kind of like, even though, Nicholas Courtney and others have famously said, oh, it looks like we're about to break into song as a barbershop quartet or something. Fair enough. But I like the idea of underestimating Unit. Like, they look like a bunch of pansies in these brown jumpsuits, and they're actually like the people who are large and in charge.
Yeah,
I like that contrast.
that does sort of explain why nobody in the hoi polloi seems to be at all particularly scared of them. Like, they'll just walk right up to the TARDIS that's supposed to be being guarded. Specifically, we're talking about
Right.
Seeley here, it's interesting that we did Claws of Axos fairly recently, right? We saw the Big Ben Josh stereotype of the yokel who comes along and falls afoul of the aliens. I mean, Seeley is really the first and maybe the worst example of this in Doctor Who history.
Well, nothing's worse than Pigman Josh, as we noted at the time. And I think
true.
Nathan Bottomley, who helped us out on that commentary, friend of the pod, he very accurately saw that this era of Doctor Who has issues with lower class people, and
It really does.
making them all kind of either, like you say, yokels, or just very ew. Like, and that, I got to say, Seeley, that's the thing he inspires more than anything else, even more than the Autons. Is like, ew, he's just kind of gross, and honestly, his accent I found
didn't even
somewhat
mention
incomprehensible.
it's utterly unnecessary as a subplot, as we know, because I didn't even mention it in TLDW. You don't need to know. Like, you could cut all the Seeley scenes out; nothing would happen. There's scenes of him arguing with his wife, who's like, "You're not going to bring that dirty box into the house," and he's like, "Look, nothing in it. No hands. Go make me tea, woman." One of the several really sexist moments in
Well,
this.
it's the moral lesson for kids, right? I didn't mind it because it's like, okay, if only he would simply bring this thing to the proper authorities,
Instead
he
of
would be
trying to get some
fine, and maybe
cash out
they
of it.
would. Yeah, he just tries to get some cash. He's out for himself, and I think the message for kids watching the show is like, hey, listen to the Brigadier, listen to the people in charge, which is arguably okay. It's a little not in keeping with today.
One scene where Seeley, like, he starts to realize kind of the enormity of the situation he's in, and he takes his cap off when he's talking to the unit officer who's interrogating him, and it's so sort of like, this is 1970, and we want the lesson to be, kids, always respect someone with a more posh accent than you. Asking you questions, you don't try and lie to them, because here's what's going to happen.
He's got your best interests at heart.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly. He does kind of like realize that it takes his cap. I'm talking to my betters here,
Right.
Even him, he's only out for the money. Not a very good stereotype. But to go back to the filming, there was one thing I was going to mention that I think is a direct result of the filming. The fact that they were on location is that the Pertwee shower scene is only there. He's only in the shower, and then, stealing the clothes of the flamboyant doctor who comes into the same room. He's only in the shower because apparently Pertwee saw this in the location and was like, "Oh, hey, well, why don't we make my scene, the doctor's in the shower?" And they don't really pay attention to him. And they could do that. They're like, hey, crazy idea, which is
what?
wild.
It's such a classic scene. It's so weird. It's a little throwaway. It's obviously a little humorous, but everybody remembers this scene, and no other Doctor has a scene like it. In fact, I don't think, is this the only time we see the Doctor shirtless in Classic Who? Is there any other shirtless scene with the Doctor?
I can't.
To my knowledge,
think of
it
any
happens
other
all the
reason.
time in New Who. I think every Doctor except maybe Whittaker
As far as we are
and I
aware,
think Capaldi.
yes, indeed. As far as we're aware, this is the first shower the Doctor has taken in 3 regenerations. He must have stunk up the TARDIS. That might be why the Time Lords could track him in the War Games. Just like
And I
follow
feel
the
like
unshowered smell.
right. Well, it's funny you say that because one of the things that's revealed is in his shower is that he has a tattoo, and this is
Yes.
obviously Jon Pertwee's tattoo.
Yes.
That he has a story about how he got probably drunkenly one night while he was
It
either a
was it
sailor or
was
something.
his birthday, and it was on board a ship. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but the funny thing is, what this has done is like, well, why would the Doctor and like regenerate and suddenly have a tattoo? And there's a good theory that actually became canon, at least
Ooh.
through, I believe, the novels. I think I hadn't read the novel, but I saw this summarized that the novel Christmas on a Rational Planet said this is a Time Lord criminal branding, which I think is just a
Ooh.
very cool thing to do.
Yeah.
I would like them to do that again, like just even if it's a throwaway thing, you could see like the master or whoever, like just in brief,
Yeah.
just sort of has this tattoo, and they don't even explain it, and you just suddenly realize, oh, it's
Uh-huh.
the
It's
same
right.
thing.
It is a criminal branding. Yeah, because the episode is kind of short, and I should say, so my history of watching Spearhead from Space is exactly this. Watched it this time all the way through. Previous time in 2010, I watched the first episode because it was one of the first things. Doctor Who was one of the first shows on Netflix on the internet.
It
Very,
wasn't on
very long
Netflix, yeah.
time ago, it was on Netflix, and this is where I went to Spearhead from Space episode 1 because I'd always wondered about it. And after having watched episode 1, I think I just sort of kind of pieced out at that point. Didn't continue watching the rest of it. It's not
Didn't hold
that
your interest.
it did not hold my interest, but
Oh, that's too bad.
it is there's so much opportunity, and again, like we talked a lot about what RTD should do in rebooting the show, but this is this is the only regeneration that we've never seen in the show.
Right, that's
We've
true.
never seen Troughton turn into Pertwee, and it's not that you can't do it retroactively, right? As we saw in Day of the Doctor and Night of the Doctor. You can stitch the regenerations together to remove any doubt, because there are still theories that there were generations in between, or the Doctor went to help out the CIA for a little bit first. It's time to close the loop, RTD. It's time to bring us some sort of CGI'd version of that regeneration where Troughton turns into Pertwee.
Wow, quite the request. I don't know how I feel about that. I do almost feel like it's a bit of a missed thing. They did, obviously it was a missed opportunity at the time. Can you go back again? Would that feel right? I think, if they're going to, if I trust anyone to do it, it's RTD, and not do it in sort of a obvious kind of way. Like it would have to be, whether it's going in the Matrix or a flashback or something.
I do like the idea that the multiverses are crashing together, in this, maybe in the Centenary special, maybe after that, we're sort of getting that sense that it's going in a multiverse direction, right? So that'd be one way to tackle that. We could kind of, it's a good excuse to look back through the Doctor's lives and potential lives.
You don't necessarily have to confirm there was another sort of secret season between the War Games and Spearhead from Space, but you could essentially have it be the gray-haired Patrick Troughton that we see regenerating, right, as opposed to him in 1969.
Which would close the loop on the two Doctors, right? The problem of why does he look so much older?
And you could still leave it to the fans to infer that he was aged from doing more things with Jamie or whoever. That could work.
What do you think of Pertwee sort of desperately trying to find his performance here? He does a lot of gurning. As we call it in Britain, a lot of facial movements. Does that whole thing about wiggling the eyebrows? Actually cracks up Caroline John at one point. It seems like she's kind of trying to not corpse at one moment, I think.
Well, this is why I think that the show really works, and I actually do think it holds your interest beyond the first episode, even though the story's just started. You have that tension between the Brigadier and Liz, which is sort of, and you also have the Brigadier who's grounding you there, who's the straight man, and you're not really sure. I mean, Pertwee honestly barely has a line in the first episode, and you don't know what he's going to be like. And there are his first scene, like with the shower, hints that it's going to be comedic, right? So are you going to be like, is he Is he going to be funny? And he turns out not so much. He's charming, and there are, there's bits where he yells at the guard, which I guess that was kind of a forced joke that it wasn't super great. But I do think he's clearly like figuring it out. But I think he's coming down on a he's more effective when he is the doctor who is serious and he's explaining to the brigadier that someone has already come and collected these things, and this thing is already bigger than you think it is. So that's where he really works. And I sort of write off the comedic bits as like he's kind of experimenting, and some work and some don't. Although I wish he would. The thing where the octopus gets him at the end, and he's like, he's a little bit goofball. He's done that before. He does that. He does that again with actually in another Auton episode in Terror of the Autons. I think that might be just sort of a reflex of his, where doesn't even know he's doing it. He's being goofy with it.
Yeah, we should point out, and it's interesting we come here straight from Carnival of Monsters, from the first appearance in Doctor Who of the man who inspired Jon Pertwee to audition for the role that he first shows us in Spearhead from Space, was his partner on the radio show the Navy Lark, and that's what Pertwee is known for. His character was actually Chief Petty Officer Pertwee in that show, so really really imaginative name, but that's what he was. He was a comic actor, and Troughton was a little bit comic, and you sort of think of Troughton as being the funny one, but it was really Pertwee who brought the comic acting sensibilities to the Doctor that we know and love. And I think it's telling that we can see, can't we, in Spearhead from Space, so many references to New Who, or as we might see it now, looking through the wrong end of the telescope, references that New Who made to Spearhead from Space. There is Matt Smith in the 11th Hour, basically going through a hospital and dressing himself.
Right.
Very, very much like the scene in Spearhead from Space where the Doctor, and this was Pertwee's own decision on the costume, wasn't it? That he was bringing in his like opera cloak and his puffy shirt that everyone was wearing.
So he says he might have. I think might have been a costume designer who said it was a little more deliberate than that, and it wasn't just him. But I'm willing to go with Pertwee, and I'd give him that sense. But I'm kind of curious, like in universe, like he's the dandy doctor. He's the guy who walks around with the fancy dress, dinner coats, etc. And is it that he's in this initial stage of the regeneration, and the first outfit he grabs is that flamboyant doctor? He basically just steals the cloak from that one doctor the doctor that is the medical doctor.
Perfectly.
Yeah.
And there is the joke about like he goes into the room marked doctors only and kind of does a comedy bit of like looking at that. It's interesting because it gets us into this debate that we've had before on the show of, is the Doctor picking up on the last thing he saw before he regenerated? We talked about with the accents that works in New Who. Or is he, as Russell T Davies has said once, like an egg, like a creature out of an egg that he imprints on the first thing he sees? So that, Pertwee is sort of flamboyant and upper class and a bit of a dandy because he's around all these doctors who are like, very, very sort of,
posh for some reason.
They're very posh. They're, there's a lot of what the devil are you playing at with this blood, man? This X-ray, what the devil is going on? Very, very posh stuff. So maybe he's just sort of picking up on that, and he's sort of imprinting from all the doctors. But I'll just say the other thing from New Who that you see very, very much kind of referenced here, or vice versa, is the Christmas invasion. The Doctor staying in bed for most of the story. Or for a large chunk of it, in any case. Definitely get that kind of vibe.
Well, that's funny because it's different from the Power of the Daleks, right? So in that one, he regenerates. He's obviously not all together perfect right away, but he doesn't have to take an extended period of time in a bed somewhere to recover. And I think they do that more often just because I think it's interesting. You think about Davison in the Zero Cabinet, for example.
Yep.
It obviously happens here. As I recall, Robot kind of just goes right into it. But it is a like they're still kind of like clearly figuring out regeneration a bit and what that should mean for the first episode. I think it's used effectively here because we want to see the Doctor, but we're kind of kept a distance from him in episode 1, and we don't see. And so they kind of cleverly make you tune in because and they give you just enough with this interesting plot with the meteorites and the creepy guy with Channing and the Brigadier and Liz Shaw that you're like, okay, yeah, let's see where this is going. And luckily it goes somewhere. I thought overall the story, like even though the Auton stuff is a little by the numbers alien invasion, I think the Autons are fairly interesting in terms of a monster. Well, maybe not necessarily interesting, but they're effective.
Yeah.
Right. And we can talk about the Autons for a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Like, I think the Autons...
It's no coincidence to just say the other New Who reference, right, is Rose, right? Rose consciously uses the Autons to relaunch the series. That was done first from Spearhead from Space, and it was a very good choice.
It was a great choice. And I think the thing that people remember most about Spearhead from Space, apart from it being Jon Pertwee's first episode and the first color episode, is that image of the Autons as store window dummies smashing out of those windows and just slaughtering people en masse throughout Britain, which you kind of think that, you know, as reset buttons go, this is a pretty big one at the end.
And it's interesting you should say that because you've just actually brought us to the play it again Sam moment of Spearhead from Space, which is that they never actually smashed through the windows.
Right.
They couldn't afford it.
You just hear it. And then they're walking around, and RTD corrected that oversight very deliberately in Rose, where windows actually get smashed. They finally had money to smash store windows. Way to go, Doctor Who. It was only, 35 years after? So that's awesome.
It's so telling of what you can do on zero budget just with reaction shots, right? And sound effects.
Totally. And they look so creepy. And the thing is, it's such an iconic image, those Autons coming out. And it really, like, if you think about the formula Doctor Who monster that we think of as a formula now anyway, which is the everyday item that's turned homicidal.
Yes.
This is really the episode that establishes that formula in my mind. Maybe there has been sort of things here and there before, but it's almost by necessity, by putting the Doctor in contemporary times.
Yeah.
The monsters would reflect contemporary just things, right? And this is like, okay, we're going to have store window dummies. We're going to have mannequins. They're going to come alive. And then kids are going to be freaked out every time their parents go to the store with them for the next 6 months to a year because we made this choice. And it was so successful and so iconic. And the formula is great. That this is Doctor Who, right? It's almost like watching Goldfinger after you've seen all the James Bond larger than life villains with a lair and, you know, crazy gadgetry. Well, like Goldfinger had all that, and the James Bond wasn't really that until Goldfinger. And this is for Spearhead from Space is kind of Doctor Who's Goldfinger in that it establishes the formula and it does it really, really well.
It really does, and it's a wonderful blending. It's kind of, you know, some bits are more successful than others. Certainly, using the factory scene, using the actual factory, the documentary footage of that was very interesting. First of all, the idea of anything actually being made in a factory in a Western country now, like just that's kind of seems wonderfully outdated. But yeah, just like that's a wonderful way to use the cheapness of it.
Yeah, that little cut scene where they establish the setting of the factory where you see the dolls being made is honestly genius. And it might be inadvertent genius because it might just be scene setting, but you're seeing like a doll, like a hallmark of childhood, like essentially turned inside out, and you're seeing literally how the sausage is made here, and it kind of you're watching this, and you react with some disgust, maybe even some. I mean, terror.
Those dolls are just creepy as hell.
Yeah,
just by themselves, especially looking at them now, like they just get creepier with age. The part that doesn't work so well is sort of blending the Doctor into the real world, I think, is Madame Tussauds,
Sure.
which is where we suddenly cut to in episode 4. That's where it's introduced, where we see that the waxwork of Major General Scobie is made out of plastic. But
Right.
yeah, in general, the idea
Entirely
of
new
using
process.
entirely new process, which is, we talked a little bit about this in the Terror of the Autons. Like, this is very early 70s thing, this sort of fear that plastic is taking over everything, which, now we know about the threat of microplastics and the fact that microplastics are in literally everything on the planet.
Well, I think you just wrote the
everywhere
next
we've looked,
Auton story.
microplastics have got there. Like, it was... Yeah, it's like a really legit fear, and we're talking about, like, this is a couple of years after the Graduate, which had that sort of great scene about, I'll just say one word to you, Benjamin: plastics. Right? It was the exciting quote unquote new future. It was very much the thing that that society was doing. Everything was becoming plastic at that time. So yeah, playing right into their fears, bang up. It must have seemed almost Black Mirror-esque to bring up plastics like that in 1970.
Well, I
very
think
much
having a plastic villain too, like a monster. They're one of the more believably bulletproof villains of Doctor Who, I would say. Because why honestly, like, I feel like that final action sequence with the unit soldiers, it's a stretch to think they're not slaughtered immediately, because bullets do nothing against the Autons. You would need explosives, something much heavier firepower to actually even do anything against them. And it made me think, Autons, they're pretty formidable if you think about it.
they are, and
yeah,
it's not just Rory that could last for 1,000 years as an Auton. Like, they just, the bullets don't seem to affect them in any way, shape, or form. They're a great villain. I'm glad that they've got the place that they have within Doctor Who history. And you almost don't need, like, that's my impression of Spearhead from Space in general, right? Is that it's much more of a visual feast than anything else. Like, you can pick apart the plot all day. There are like 10 million ways to do that, but you're kind of missing the point. It's just a wonderful visual introduction to Doctor Who, and the Autons and the creepy as hell plastic masks are part of that.
How did you like Liz? How did you like Liz as her first adventure?
Sassy Liz. Yeah, she's
sassy in the
she's
first outing,
super
isn't she?
sassy in this outing. And it's sort of weird that the Brigadier is kind of like the one who's answering her questions a lot. And it's not quite consistent, right? It gets back to picking holes in the plot, that she steals the TARDIS key for the Doctor at one point, which is a great companion thing to do. Steals it from the Brigadier's desk. But the Brigadier is in there talking to a guy who's talking about plastic coming to life, and Lishaw is somehow not interested in the context of this discussion. Or apparently she can't do two things at once, right?
Right.
Kind of a bit subconscious sexism there. Speaking of conscious sexism, of course, it's all over the place. Kind of glad that Major General Scobie is kind of a victim of this, and maybe this was intentional. He's sort of a victim of the Autons, in part because he has this moment of, oh, well, Brigadier, you didn't tell me that your chief scientist was such a pretty lady, or something. No, that's not exactly what he said, but it's like on that level. Oh, a pretty face to look at around the place. Aren't you a lucky chap?
You almost feel like something along the lines of the trigger warning they put for Talons of Wang Chang could go in front of any number of Doctor Who classic episodes about the sexism. It is funny.
Yeah, it does,
you
does
might
contain that for sure.
You might,
but
in hindsight, think that this is why Liz left. Ultimately, because there's just too much testosterone. Yeah,
I would totally not blame Lishaw for heading back to Cambridge after all that. It is a shame that she was only in it for one season. It is a great shame that we didn't get to see her character develop more. It's even greater shame that Jo was sort of deliberately dialed down as a companion in Terror of the Autons, which is in so many ways kind of the mirror image of this. But yeah, I mean, totally sign me up, and no wonder the Doctor immediately takes to Liz Shaw. They have such great chemistry, Caroline, Jon, and Pertwee. It's a real shame we didn't get more of it.
Well, it's also good. I felt like Liz gets one of the better introductions, and it's written in such a way that it allows us. She's almost like a companion to the Brigadier at first, because it allows them to essentially recap what's going on, who Unit is, and introduce a little bit of believable tension between the two of them, which you kind of intrigued right away. So I think the show itself starts off this story on very much the right foot. Again, I thought Caroline John is a little too heavy on this ass in this first one, but that's, you're in the same way, Pertwee's figuring out what his role is, she's figuring out hers, and she's very believably drawn to the Doctor as sort of a fellow scientist. So that all works. I also think Liz, just generally, and I'm a fan of Liz, just as companions go. I think her maturity is what is very refreshing. In that, we've just had Zoe, who again is a very smart person, but she was very young. She was ended up acting girlish in a lot of episodes, and there's kind of been, like, as far as female companions in Doctor Who, I don't know if we'd had a strong one since maybe even Barbara at this point. I mean, it's hard to say with Polly because I hadn't seen a lot of her run, but I feel like Liz sort of sets a new bar there, and ultimately it was a bar they decided to lower.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
it's a very
but they did when you get to, say, Romana and even further out, Nuhu. I think it's clear you want someone who has, if not necessarily an intellectual equal with the Doctor, but has something going on upstairs, and I think Liz does that extremely well.
Yeah, something in common. And it's a nice counterpoint to the Doctor and the Brigadier's relationship. I thought the three of them together really, as a trio of leads, fantastic chemistry there.
Yeah, no question.
And not sure what else we can say about that. Yeah, it is. What else do we want to talk about this? About Spearhead from Space, Pete?
Well, there's some interesting,
well, I will tell you one thing.
Yeah.
Speaking of Madame Two Swords, it's sort of like it's one of the reasons I don't think that those scenes hold up pretty well is they show how bad the Madame Two Swords waxworks actually are, and how unlikely you are to confuse them with real life people. But there's a scene where we see a waxwork Martin Luther King and a waxwork Gandhi. And, and so this is interspersed within all of the other images of, we get Nixon. For some reason, chief civil servants have been stuck in there rather incongruously.
That's bizarre.
Not that Madame Tussauds would ever do that. But it made me think, this is a way that you could push the Auton story further in a future episode of Doctor Who. What if they had chosen to come back in the form of Martin Luther King or Gandhi? I don't think you should choose those two precisely because there's so many pitfalls with doing that. But
right.
What if instead of choosing the leaders that we fear or hate, those civil servants, the bluff old major general, that kind of thing, what if they chose someone who everyone adored, like a Martin Luther King or a Gandhi character who's just could so appeal to the masses in a positive sense and preach peace and nonviolence? I think that would be a very interesting Auton episode if they're able to perfectly replicate a world leader or someone who is on the world stage who preaches peace and somehow, gets people to, I don't know, somehow gets people to lay down their arms, and kind of, it could be a very interesting direction for the show to go.
Yeah, I would love it.
With the Autons. Yeah.
I think what you could do, here's the thing. I think you want to have the Autons do that duplication thing. I think that is underused. But how are they distinctive from the Zygons when that's That's kind of their thing. Now, to your point, I don't think they've used the Zygons in this way. Like the idea of impersonating essentially an influencer, and then the plot is like, why have they gone out of character and started acting in a way that perhaps subverts their message? And that's pretty good. But I guess I would say, like, do you do Autons or do you do Zygons? And
you can
how
go either way.
how do you make that choice? I think with Autons, you have a good little army of plastic guys that are very, very creepy.
Yeah.
I feel like with Zygons, we've seen enough Zygon invasions. Well, I guess we've seen enough of invasions of both of them. But
yeah, it's just, with I guess the closest we've come is the Zygons trying to impersonate Elizabeth I, who was one of those leaders who I guess was both admired and feared.
What if they teamed up, the Zygons and the Autons? And
my God, the A to Z team up. That would be fantastic.
You know what would be fun? Doctor Who should try this. That instead of thwarting an invasion of Earth, one of the evil aliens gets invaded by one of the other evil aliens. So he has to save the Zygon homeworld from the Autons.
Love it.
Because apparently the Autons, according to Channing, have been colonizing worlds for 1,000 million years, like 1 billion years, which is a good line, but it's one of those lines that drives the scale up to an absurd point where you're just like, wait a minute. You've literally been colonizing for 1 billion years, and I guess covertly, because the Doctor's never heard of you. And how big is your empire then? Or is it just are they more like parasites that ransack one world and go to the next? I don't know.
Well,
it was
let's not forget
too much.
The Doctor's memories have been taken from him, so it's possible he'd had heard of them before. But anyway, it's sort of it's a little inconsistent. What do you think about the notion that the Time Lords dropped the Doctor here at this point in Earth's history deliberately, like right next to where this Auton invasion was taking place? Or was it just random?
Yeah, well, I think it is, in hindsight, somewhat deliberate, and maybe. Well, I guess I don't know if they predicted the Master, but this is clearly like everything the Brigadier says in episode 1, where he's talking about we've drawn attention to ourselves and therefore we've become a target for various alien races. I think that might have played into what the Time Lords were doing. It's like, okay, let's send him where not necessarily that we want to save Earth, but let's keep the Doctor busy. We don't want to have him messing around too much with his own TARDIS and doing whatever else. And there's going to be stuff for him to do here. It's kind of like when you leave your kid in the playpen with a bunch of toys, right? It's like, okay, you hang out there and goof around with your little.
There's also this theory that that the Doctor was. There's a theory that the Doctor was left there in Unit's hands so that he wouldn't get mixed up with Torchwood.
Oh,
obviously there's a retroactive theory from New Who, but I kind of like that idea.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad. But why would they want him to get involved with Torchwood? What would the Time Lords care?
Indeed.
Hey, I got to give a little credit to, because I mentioned him. I thought the guy who played Channing, who I guess is Hugh Burden, was very good. He sort of has an excellent, understated performance. I mean, he's basically memorable in that he's not memorable. He somehow makes total blandness a menacing thing. And, when I started this episode again, I hadn't seen it in a while. I was like, oh yeah, that guy's creepy. And so it was kind of, like I say, it's a standout performance by having not a single memorable line, except maybe Total Destruction. I do remember Total Destruction. Destroy, Total
Destruction.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does get to chew the scenery on that one. Which reminds me, what did your kids think of Spearhead from Space, Pete?
Oh, they enjoyed it. Yeah, they thought it was great. I think they were creeped out by the Autons. Definitely held their interest from start to finish. They like Jon Pertwee. I think he just has this presence that kids like, that I think comes through in his performance as Doctor Who. Obviously, Wurzel Gummidge, as he did later, very much obviously a kid show. he has that appeal that
It's a
holds
very
Yeah.
reassuring image. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's almost like he's almost like your grandpa, honestly. Like he's like, come here, kids, and he dresses like a grandpa from the olden times. So we'll
That may explain why he is the randomizer's favorite doctor now. I think almost we could say that he's sort of taken over from Capaldi.
I think so. I think we can officially say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Capaldi is like evil grandpa, and the randomizer was initially drawn to, but now he's seen Pertwee. He's like, oh, cool grandpa.
So that brings us to one of our 4 questions, or as I think I might start calling them, our 4 questions to Doomsday.
Nice.
Which the first one is, why did the randomizer take us here? And it could be as simple as the randomizer loves Pertwee. We just came from Carnival of Monsters, so in a sense, there's sort of a book ending here, because this is the beginning of his exile, and Carnival of Monsters was the first post-exile episode, right? So that could be it. But there's one more theory I have if you don't have one.
No, go for it.
So, funnily enough, we're recording this podcast on Sunday, August 14th. And just yesterday, there was a Doctor Who convention held at the very location they filmed Spearhead from Space.
No.
So I guess the Wood Norton in Evesham. Evesham, am I saying that right?
Evesham.
Evesham, okay.
And maybe.
It was yesterday. It was yesterday on August 13th, and it was called Spearhead Live. So boom. It's huge.
Wow.
And Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred were both there. And if you check Sophie Aldred's Twitter feed, she's very active on Twitter. She got to pose in the shower. The classic Pertwee shower. I don't know if feds were allowed to do that or whatever, but
my God.
So that's got to be it. That the randomizer knew somehow this was going to be delayed, our taping till August, and it's just this crazy coincidence that all of that happened. They even had one of the guys from Spearhead from Space. So the radar operator at the very beginning of episode, like literally the first scene. That guy.
That guy. The most memorable thing about him is that his boss was a woman.
Yeah, I guess his name
felt like we're introducing the new era.
Totally.
Yeah.
So kind of makes up a little bit for those comments to Liz Shaw later, I suppose.
I guess.
But the gentleman's name is Ellis Jones. That's it. He was the unit radar technician. So I'm sure he's a mainstay of conventions all around Evesham.
If you want an Evesham convention to celebrate Spearhead from Space, he's your guy. He's your man.
Yeah.
He's your go-to guy. I love that. That's fantastic. And I'm not a little afraid of the randomizer once again.
Right.
For arranging this. Like you can pattern match and draw connections and everything, but like the randomizer does seem to make it super easy for us to see these connections. So it's a little above the natural random level, I think. So
So
go ahead. No.
It's just like the randomizer, it's really woken us up to that experiencing Doctor Who is a far from linear process. Like we're beyond linear time here, guys, and always have been. There are so many connections and so many just sort of interesting ways to put things together in the show. Honestly, I would not want to do this podcast any other way. Like this random journey just is revealing a lot about Doctor Who and even stuff around Doctor Who. That's super awesome.
I also like that the Brigadier says that there are 500 inhabited planets in the galaxy that might come and invade us.
Right.
And which is, I believe that figure is very close to what Frank Drake initially in the Drake equation came up with. A number, something around there, so it's actually pretty well informed. But it also suggests that Doctor Who's going to go on for at least 500 stories, and given that we're just at 301, according to the Pull to Open Codex, that suggests that the show is very much is still in middle age.
Well, just wait until the James Webb Telescope gives us back some better data. Be like 5,000 at least in
Yeah.
the local arm of Mutter Spiral.
Indeed.
So moving on to question 2, what if the evil plot had succeeded? What would have happened?
Okay.
Got a take?
Yeah. Well, it's very hard for the nesting consciousness to take over Earth this way, because they've chosen an isolated island off the coast of Europe, which is kind of the mistake of a lot of these alien invasions, that they choose to do it in Britain, which
Right.
is, if at any point it goes wrong, the Doctor can't fix it, whatever, the rest of the world can just nuke Britain. Right?
Yeah.
Just be carpet bomb. Like, what are they going to do? Just like, how fast can you build a plastic bridge over the channel, Autons?
Right. So
Yeah,
my thought here is that what if the evil plot had succeeded? Didn't it kind of? Like they actually got to the point where the store window dummies were busting out, slaughtering tons of people, and taking over communications facilities. So yes, the Doctor ultimately defeats them, but I do feel like they essentially went a little too far with like the Autons doing their thing, because if you actually took that seriously, like it'd be a pretty wounded country, if not world. And surely there'd be some questions about why hundreds, if not thousands of people were just killed by store window dummies. That's not students. That's not a prank. So
it's not industrial action.
Yeah. So like, it's funny that looking at this story, that the reset button is hit so quickly. But if you went further with it, I suppose you could say maybe Liz doesn't figure out that she just has to attach that cable back to the Doctor's device, and he gets strangled by the nesting monster, regenerates again, but doesn't stop.
Into Tom Baker.
Yeah, he doesn't recover in time to stop the Autons from taking over at least the UK. So you would think Tom Baker then becomes a prisoner of the Nestines. Maybe they actually crack time travel by capturing his TARDIS, and then the Nestines become this dominant race that may end up competing with the Time Lords or challenging them. So maybe that's what happens.
And then we do know from like Deadly Assassin, how much like Waxworks Time Lord Society is in itself. So they
Totally.
it'd be quite easy to, I think, impersonate the leading civil servants of Time Lord bureaucracy.
Yeah,
and they're just sort of a society of unquestionably, obeying orders. So
they all look.
I don't think there's any
in those hats.
Yeah, exactly. They're just all the same. Nobody's paying attention to who's plastic or anything. I totally would pick the Nestines over the Time Lords in that conflict. If that was the Time War, it would be over in 5 minutes.
Yeah, for sure.
If only the Daleks had been able to impersonate Time Lords.
Autons, underrated monster. All right, so next question 3. Where is the Clara Splinter here?
Yeah, I think maybe she could be at the door of the shower, like handing out towels and making sure that the Doctor isn't seen and that he chooses the right costume. And making sure it's really him and not a Nestine duplicate by checking for the tattoo.
That could be it. My theory would be she's on the phone talking, or maybe it's the night before the Autons come alive, and she's calling every store on every street, don't come in tomorrow. And so the body count is thus minimized to only like a few dozen people, letting Unit cover it up. So like they still bust out, they still take control of communications facilities. That happens because the Brigadier says it, but there aren't as many people slaughtered. It's basically just the people we see in that bus stop or whatever.
Yeah, that's it.
So as long as they can do that,
I do think think the other reason for putting her in the shower scene, though, is that one thing we know about Clara from the time of the Doctor is that she likes to hang out naked with the Doctor. So like this is the only other time in his timeline she can really do that. Kind of a bit weird, but there you go.
Yeah, or perhaps not weird. Perhaps very, very natural. So,
Sure.
finally, where does this rank in our rating system? Is this a Dalek? Is it an Ogron? Is it a Viscount banger? What say you?
I think it's a Dalek, but I think it's a plastic Dalek. It's kind of very see-through. Kind of, will disintegrate on contact, Dalek. If you actually try and touch its body, it just falls to pieces. But other than that, it's if you look at it from a distance, you're like, oh, nice, shiny, colorful Dalek.
Yeah, I think so. Here's where I agree it's a Dalek. I think my test is actually I had to think back to when I first saw it for the first time. So I think I've mentioned when I was watching the run on Western Canadian television of Davison. It got to the end of Davison, and then they started with Pertwee, and they started with this episode. And I was kind of disappointed when I realized this wasn't the next Doctor that I had just seen Peter Davison regenerate into. And so my bar was probably much higher in terms of wanting to like the show. And by the end of this one, I was like, oh, okay. Well, this is kind of cool. I like this. And I like how it's not just a Doctor Who episode, but it is establishing a new type of Doctor Who episode. And that saying like, this is the kind of thing you're going to expect, especially that final scene with him and the Brigadier. And he's talking about, well, I'll come work for you if you give me this stuff. And I thought, okay, this is all right. And I like these people. So I'll be back next week. And luckily, like, and it only went up from here. Like Spearhead from Space is like, it's pretty good. And then later, the next episode is the Silurians, then the Ambassadors of Death, and then of course Inferno, which is one of the best Doctor Who episodes of all time. So
that's what you want the shape of the season to be, right? You don't want to open with necessarily your biggest Viscount banger.
Exactly. Yeah. Set the stage, and it does set the stage really, really well. So good job, Spearhead. You did great.
And that sets the stage for us to use our Doctor impregnated TARDIS keys to actually get back into the TARDIS. Send some smoke wafting out from within.
We didn't talk about the continuity weirdness of the key only working for him, which doesn't ever happen again in the whole run. It's funny. Like it's like he says, I think at some point it has like a metabolism detector or something. I guess the TARDIS has. Just like, okay, I guess this one time it does. Just like at one time it had Temple of Grace, I guess.
Yeah, well, rule number one, the Doctor lies, and he definitely lies in this episode. As the first thing he does with the TARDIS key is tries to run away, and I love that. I love that he did that. I love that he sort of looks kind of sheepish after he tries it. It's just like, oh, I'm sorry, the Time Lords, they kind of messed me up. They messed up the dematerialization.
He knows he's been a bad boy.
I like that. That was. Yeah, he's been a bad boy, and it's almost Capaldi-esque of that sort of trying to run away from the situation where he's supposed to be saving the Earth. Love that. Love that.
Absolutely.
So totally worth it. Sad that we never get to see inside the TARDIS at this stage. He could so easily prove to Liz that it is dimensionally transcendent, which I believe is the first time he uses those words.
Right.
As well as something else.
Hearts. Yeah.
Yes, we haven't talked about that. 2 hearts, non-human blood. It's the first time we've sort of examined the Doctor at this stage. And apparently his pulse is 10.
Well, that's when he was like sleeping, though. That's his regeneration hibernation pulse is 10.
But why would it be 10 with 2 hearts? I don't know. Any doctors out there, please write in and let us know exactly what would happen if you had 2 hearts.
They took the wrong pulse. There's one that's 10 and one that's 110. So they kind of average out. Maybe that's how it works.
I love it.
By the way, my theory on the key is that there's just a trick to it. It's not a metabolism detector. There's just, like sometimes there's just a trick to it. And it's like, there it is.
It's like this classic thing people always do with their own thing. No, you got to just jiggle it. Yeah. Just jiggle it. And you're like, what does that even mean? I do not know how to get into your house, Doctor.
I'm picturing Tegan. I've got the knack.
Nice Australian accent there.
Yeah.
And so with that, we should actually get into our TARDIS, activate our randomizer, and find out where we're going next. Pete, would you like to tell the good people how we do that?
Yes, we activate our randomizer, which is composed of two components: the Pull to Open Codex, which is a spreadsheet of all 301 episodes of the show, TV stories of the show. And there is the second component, the random element, that tells us where in the spreadsheet we're going to go, which is random.org. And that is
Random.org
Yep.
uses atmospheric noise. The atmosphere is not just full of Auton meteorites. It is also full of atoms bouncing around. So that's what random.org uses instead of a pseudo-random algorithm, which is what computers normally use, and which is not true randomness. We bring you only the finest, bespoke Earth atmosphere randomness here on Pull to Open. So my random.org is ready. When Pete gives me the signal, I will generate a random number between 1 and 301. But first, do we have challenges to the randomizer?
I think we need to have challenges. I think we got it. And I think I'm just going to go with something predictable because it never listens to us anyway. And we've been hearing a lot about David Tennant and how he is back, obviously, for the 60th. Bring us to some Tennant,
Yeah.
Let's just do a Tennant episode.
I like that we're both thinking the same thing, which is please get us out of the classic series, but maybe if we word it in a different way, the randomizer will be tempted to stop showing us classic series. But here's going to be my tempting thing. Take us to Rose.
Oh, wow. You're playing roulette here, my man.
Yeah, I really am. I'm like, you've given us two Auton stories. Let's give us the third.
The third proper Auton episode.
Let's have the Autons be the first monster that we have visited every other than the one and done ones. I don't think there's any other that's true for that we've just seen all of them.
Right. And I guess you wouldn't count because they're not actually the villains of the Pandorica Opens. I mean, they are, but they're not. And it's not a proper Auton episode. So
I will definitely take the Pandorica Opens, by the way, randomizer, if you're listening. All right, give me a countdown. I will hit the generate.
All right, let's do this in 4, 3, 2, 1.
Unstable.
155.
Ooh, I don't think we're quite there, but we are at Battlefield.
Our first Sylvester McCoy.
Yes, it's our first McCoy, and it features the Brigadier.
Oh my God!
Still the randomizer's favorite companion.
I love it. And
Wow.
I've not seen Battlefield. This is the era of Sylvester McCoy. I'd already stopped watching the show at this point, so I'm truly excited. Something else to see for the first time.
Big deal, yeah. It's the first story of the last season of the classic series.
Ooh, and we just went from the first story of the rebooted season, to the first story of the last season. Oh my goodness!
Wow. Battlefield.
So many connections.
Okay.
All right, I'll take it. We wanted to get out of Classic Who. We're not going to get out of Classic Who. The Time Lords have kept us exiled here, and for their own reasons. I
got to start working on that dematerialization circuit for sure. While we do that, guys, we just want to say thank you very much for listening and being on this journey with us. This is Pull to Open. It's a podcast. In case you found this on a web embed somewhere or in some other place, and you haven't subscribed yet, please do, whether you're subscribing to us on your podcast app or YouTube. We really appreciate the follow. Go ahead, as we say, leave a review wherever you're encountering us. We really appreciate it. Those reviews really make the podcast more visible in more places, and we are in all the places. So wherever you find a good podcast app or Doctor Who discussion on YouTube, you'll find us, follow us, and come say hi. And follow us.
It may be a podcast. I'm sort of not entirely convinced that it's not 17 TikToks in a trench coat.
Nice.
But certainly we'll continue to be there on TikTok, we'll be there on YouTube, we'll be there on Spotify, we'll be there everywhere you are. And all you have to do to find us is Pull to Open.
Or Pull to Open 63 on Twitter and Instagram. But TikTok, you can drop the 63. It's just Pull to Open. Follow us there, drop us a line, and we'll see you next time for Battlefield.
Looking forward to it. Bye, guys.